Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. The opening ceremony of the International Conference 2022.
Recording in progress.
The opening ceremony of the International Conference 2022 is about to begin in a few minutes. We would like to inform that registration is already open. Kindly please find the registration link in chat box. As a gentle reminder, this opening ceremony could be viewed through YouTube channel BRIN Indonesia. Thank you. Good morning, selamat pagi, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. His Excellency Chairman of National Research and Innovation Agency, Dr. Laksana Trihandoko, Waitrose Secretariat China Office, Dr. Paul E. Burrows, is also as Vice President of Jiangsu Industrial Technology Research Institution, G3 China. Acting of Deputy for Human Resource of Science and Technology, Edi Giri Rahman Putra, PhD, Daily Chief Executive and also Coordinator for Partnership Development of Research and Innovation Infrastructure, BRIN, Ms. Teresia Ningsi Astuti, all others, distinguished guests, institution representatives, and all participants. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the opening ceremony of International Conference, today, Monday, November 21st, 2022. As a brief information, the opening ceremony is a follow-up activity initiated by the Providencia Solusindo, supported by the National Research and Innovation Agency, BRIN Indonesia. Excellencies, distinguished guests, participants, ladies and gentlemen, to begin with, the national anthem, Indonesia Raya. Please be attentive. Ladies and gentlemen, the following agenda is a report. May I invite Daily Chief Executive and also Coordinator for Partnership Development of Research and Innovation Infrastructure, BRIN, Ms. Teresia Ningsi Astuti, to address her activity implementation report. Ms. Tracy, Kindly please, the screen is yours.
Thank you, Ms. Dia. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera, Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, Salam Kebajikan. The Honorable Chairman of the National Research and Innovation Agency, Dr. Laksana Trihandoko, our keynote speaker from Waitrose Secretariat China Office, or Vice President of G3 China, Dr. Paul A. Braus, BRIN Echelon 1 and 2 officials, conference participants from both BRIN and non-BRIN, and all distinguished guests. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the chairman, official, and the BRIN Civitas who have entrusted me with coordinating in the International Conference 2022. This conference is not the first time where we have integrated all the conferences. It all started in 2015 when the Indonesian Institute of Sciences, LIPI, was given the mandate by Dr. Laksana Trihandoko to integrate various international conferences into one platform, which was held in collaboration with a promoter. The idea was done so that the conferences were more efficient and effective and carried out professionally. Establishing networking with the researchers locally and internationally is important for increasing cross-border cooperation and facilitating researchers to achieve their input, such as research paper and proceeding and journals. I sincerely hope that in the future, the research outcome will not only end up on papers, but will impact and benefit both industries and communities significantly. The international conferences will be held from 22 to 25 November 2022 and 6 to 7 December 2022 as follows. International Symposium on Green Technology for Value Chain. International Conference on Nuclear Science, Technology and Application. International Conference on Computer Control, Informatics and its Application. International Conference on Sustainability, Energy and Application. International Seminar on Metallurgy and Material. Conference on Quantum Science and Technology. International Conference for Health Research. International Conference of Lignocellulose. International Seminar on Aerospace Science and Technology, International Symposium on Eastern Indonesian Marine Ecosystem, International Symposium on Applied Chemistry, International Symposium of Innovative Bioproduction Indonesia on Biotechnology and Bioengineering, International Conference on Food and Agriculture Science, International Conference on Radio Science, Equatorial Atmospheric Science and Environment, International Conference on Radar, Antenna, Microwave, Electronics and Telecommunication. There are currently 15 conferences, of which 12 conferences will be held online and 3 conferences will be held in hybrid format. The number of participants attending the conference is summarized as follows. The speaker, 123. Paper presenter, 1,715. Audience or non-presenter, 191. So the total is about 2,029. I would like to also thank the acting deputy for human resource and science and technology who has facilitated us by hosting these conferences. The acting deputy for facilitation of research and innovation has supported us by funding the Civitas to join these conferences. The researchers in this integration process, they are still productive in conducting research and producing the papers. the promoter who has organized these conferences, the scientific committees have worked really hard in preparing the call for papers, paper selection, conference session, and publication. Speakers, reviewers, sponsors, and associates who have supported our conferences. The core committee and coordinating activities with the scientific committees and promoter, and all stakeholders that I couldn't mention one by one. Finally, I would like to apologize if there are still many shortcomings during the planning and organizing of these conferences. I hope that in the future, this event will improve and continue to better serve and scientific communities. I wish you all great conference days ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Tracy. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, for our next agenda, I kindly invite Acting of Deputy for Human Resource of Science and Technology BRIN, Edi Giri Rahman Putra, PhD, to address his welcome speech. Mr. Edi, kindly please, the screen is yours.
Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Very good morning and hope we are all in good health. The honorable guests, His Excellency, the Chairman of the National Research and Innovation Agency, BRIN, Dr. Laksana Trihandoko, Chairman, Head of Research Organization, and Head of the Research Center of BRIN, our keynote speakers, Dr. Paul Elburos, invited speakers, presenters, and all participants of the BRIN's International Conference 2022. We are very grateful today because we are able to host the BRIN International Conference 2022 with a very huge number of participants. It's almost 2,000 participants. We hope this conference provide an opportunity for all BRIN researchers to present their research result and publish this paper in international publication. Ladies and gentlemen, improving the quantity and quality of science and technology human is a priority program. The Indonesian government is strengthening the quality and effectiveness of Indonesian human resources, which is in line with the Indonesian National Priority Program for 2020 until 2020. Therefore, the quality of human resources is needed to strengthen the research and innovation ecosystem that can increase adoption, mastery, and culture of research and innovation in Indonesia. The Deputy for Human Resource of Science and Technology has the task of formulating and implementing policy, development, national development, talent management, education, and management of science and technology human. One of the competency development is facilitating international publication through conference activities, collaborating with the Deputy for Facilitation of Research and Innovation of BRIN. It is hoped that through this conference, many researchers and others from local and foreign countries can share knowledge, experiences, and have deeper discussion, initiate or strengthen research collaboration. We strongly encourage building and strengthening research collaboration between researchers at BRIN and their partners by utilizing research mobility schemes. We have schemes that invite local and foreign researchers to become postdoctoral, visiting researchers, even as professor to strengthen the research and innovation ecosystem in Indonesia. We hope that this research mobility scheme can be utilized optimally starting in 2023, strengthen Indonesian research and innovation ecosystem. Finally, I would like to thank those who have helped organize this conference so that this event can be held very well. And I hope the BRIN International Conference 2022 is going smoothly. Thank you very much for your attention and have a great conference. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much, Mr. Edi Giri. Distinguished guests and all representatives, moreover, National Research and Innovation Agency, Republic of Indonesia, would address an opening remark as well. I would like to invite the chairman, Mr. Laksana Trihandoko. Mr. Handoko, kindly please, the time is yours. Ladies and gentlemen, we still wait for our chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, as mentioned, this conference is the biggest one in Indonesia with various topics in 15 conferences, such as food, agriculture, energy, informatics, telecommunication, health, equatorial atmosphere, aerospace, environment, nuclear, radio sciences, microwave, radar, antenna, chemistry, metallurgy, materials, marine, green technology, biotechnology, bioproducts, quantum, and more. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Laksana Trihandoko.
Thank you very much, everyone. Very good morning. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera, salam sehat untuk semuanya. Salam, Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, Salam Kebajikan. So the Honorable, our keynote speakers, one keynote speaker, from WITRO, Secretariat China Office, and also the Vice President of JITRI China, Dr. Paul A. Burrows, and the Honorable Acting Deputy, our Deputy Chairman for Human Resources of Science and Technology, who is leading this event, and has facilitated hosting the conference, and all of distinguished experts and speakers, and also participants. So first of all, I would like to first of all, it is a great honor for me to be here to join this international conferences, consisting of many international conferences, covering various research of fields. And it is a great pleasure for me to meet you all, even virtually. So, ladies and gentlemen, the participants, so scientific publications is undoubtedly very, very important, for all of us, the academia, either from universities and also from research institutions like BRIN. And it is also essential to develop a new knowledge through the scientific publications. And conferences, on the other hand, is one of our tool, our instruments to make interactions, to know each other, to discuss many many interesting findings, interesting invention, innovations coming from another researchers and academia across the globe. So, and actually this is the basic of our research activities conducted by researchers wherever you are. So now after the establishment of BRIN, after the establishment of BRIN, the National Research and Innovation Agency, we have already integrated all of governmental research institutions across this country, Indonesia. And of course, that also means we carry over all of the related activities, including hosting some conferences, also managing some research journals, and also some workshops, and so on and so forth. And considering how we could improve, the efficiency and the productivity of our research activities. At the end of the day, I would like to inform you that we have decided to integrate all of the scientific conferences. We organized previously by the former research institutions into a single series of international conferences. We do expect that through this initiative, we can invite, we can attract more external researchers to join our conferences, so we can realize and also we can achieve better environment, not only for our researchers but also for researchers in Indonesia in general. So hopefully, we could continue organizing this series of international conferences, starting from this year, and hopefully we can continue also next year and many years to come. But more importantly, I personally already requested to our researchers to consider how to integrate more the existing international conferences, so we can make it much more attractive and also much more, on the other hand, much more efficient, for all of us in the future. So I do believe that this one will not be the last one, of course, but we do still, we have to improve, we have to keep improving, organizing the international conferences within BRIN, in the future, so we cannot just have too many international conferences covering all research fields, but we have to somehow, for example, we can consider to have special special conference focusing in very particular research field, involving interdisciplinary research fields, for example. So this is not only about how to reduce the number, but we have to be back to the basic philosophy of having scientific conferences. Scientific conference is intended to have to be a platform, for all participants to exchange ideas, to have the interactions among researchers with different backgrounds, with different disciplines, and so on and so forth. So I think this is very important for us to to make a continuous improvement, in some sense, in order to make our activities much more attractive, and not only for researchers and academia, but maybe also for some industries, for example, in the case of at least in the case of research area which might be interesting for applications or something like that. So I think this is all what I can mention in this opening remarks. So I wish you having enjoyable and also fruitful discussion during the series of international conferences organized by BRIN. And so taking this opportunity, as already requested by the MC, I officially open the International BRIN Conference 2022. Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much, Mr. Laksana Trihandoko, for the opening remarks. Distinguished guests, authors, participants, ladies and gentlemen, we are now going for the main session, the presentation from our keynote speaker within a topic, Way Through G3, Risk and Reward in International Innovation. Please welcome Dr. Paul E. Burrows.
Morning, I'm Paul Burrows, Vice President of Jiangsu Industrial Technology Research Institute in Nanjing, China. That's actually half my job. I also, as part of that, run the Waitrose Secretariat China office. And I have a couple of consulting businesses with the other half of my time, KB Science in Boston in the US, and Nanjing Riata here in Nanjing. I have to apologize, I can't be with you this morning, and I had to record this presentation because right now, as you're listening to this, if things go well, I should be on approach to Dubai on an airplane on my way back to Athens. I would have loved to have been in Jakarta, but unfortunately, I just got through with the Waitrose Global Summit, a 2-year event, and the General Assembly, and I'm on my way back to Europe from that. So what I wanted to talk to you about is, of course, the easy question, why innovate across borders? And I call this the easy question because it has an easy answer. The sorts of problems we're facing in the 21st century do not respect national borders. Problems like pandemics, problems like pollution, both gas pollution, plastic pollution, problems like climate change. These sorts of problems don't care if we happen to draw a border between one country and another. Because the problems don't respect our borders, we're unlikely to find the solutions unless we also look across borders. That's the easy part of the argument. So we also know that innovation is important. Innovation is a word that's thrown around a lot. And a couple of years ago, I went off to find a definition, or what does it actually mean? And it turns out if you use Google you can find at least 30 or 40 definitions of invention online. Everybody thinks it's something slightly different. In a way, it's like the 7 blind men examining an elephant, if you know that story. One of the blind men gets a hold of the tail and he decides an elephant is a snake-like creature, and another is at the side of the elephant, so he decides it's a big wall, and another has the ear and he decides it's a big flappy thing, and they all see something different. The Schumpeter definition is one that's often used, a practical implementation of ideas. There's also actually an ISO standard for innovation, believe it or not. You can look it up, ISO 56000. But across all of these definitions is a common focus, which is newness, improvement, and the spread of ideas and technologies. So I've been in this business for 35 years now, and I generally say a couple of things about innovation. If there's no risk, there's no innovation. If you're not taking risk, you're probably just importing technology. You're not actually trying to innovate. And if there's no motivation, there's no innovation. I like to say, you know, the caveman who invented fire was not the happy caveman sitting in the cave, content with his life. Caveman who invented fire was complaining that it's cold and damp, and he didn't like it, and he wanted to solve the problem. So you need two things. You need risk and you need motivation, and you have to manage that risk. You're all familiar with the risk-reward curve of investment. The further you go out along the risk curve, the higher your reward, but also the higher your risk of loss. And I think managing the risk of innovation is one of the key criteria for running a successful innovation organization. So when I talk about risk, what's the biggest risk of all? This is a survey that I found a couple of years ago. It was first published in Forbes magazine, and it's the top 10 reasons, top 20 reasons actually, that startup companies fail. And what they did was they went around 101 failed companies in the US. It's a US-based survey, and they asked the management team, why did the startup fail? And this is a list, the top 20 reasons that came up. And the thing that interests me most about this list is the word technology appears exactly 0 times. Top left there, you can see the biggest reason for startup companies to fail is no market need. Second is that they ran out of cash. And this leads to what I often try to tell people who claim that I'm in the technology transfer business. I'm not, because people don't buy technology. I've seen many try to sell it. They've failed probably 95% of the time. People don't buy technology, they buy solutions to problems. So the biggest risk of all is the risk of no market. I found this quote in a report on electric mobility, and I think it was very insightful. It was from a fellow called Hayden Eames in an address to the Association of Electric Vehicle Manufacturers, and he said this: I think there's a great tendency amongst well-trained commercial people to confuse the conditions and requirements of an established industry with the conditions that prevail at the inception of an industry, where you've got to create demand before the competition comes in. What Hayden was basically saying is that it's very difficult to innovate unless you have a market into which to innovate. No market, no innovation. And he gave that quote, by the way, in April 1907, which I think was the last time in the US, at least, that there were more electric vehicles on the road than there were gas-powered vehicles. So the biggest risk of all is the risk of no market. And that comes to answer the question why I'm in China, which I get asked quite a lot. People first of all point out that I don't look Chinese, and then they say, well, why are you in China? And the big reason for that comes down to this question of a market for innovation. Now, you all know China's big, and I'd like to show you this map. For this audience, I think this map is good enough. When I give this talk to an American audience, I have to start with a much bigger map, and here is China. But I think you guys know that. And I'm based in Nanjing. Population of, this is a little out of date, the population of Nanjing now is just over 9 million. It's a city about the size of Cairo, a little smaller than Cape Town. Certainly a very big city by European standards, maybe not so much by Southeast Asian. But by Chinese standards, Nanjing is a relatively small tier 2 city. Here's the big hitters. Shanghai, over 27 million people. Beijing, well over 20 million. And these are the official numbers. They don't reflect the migrant workers that are probably topping this up by several million more. In fact, there's over 100 cities in China, over 1 million people. These are they with the little red circles. And it's physically big. China, over 4,000 kilometers from one end to another. And I'll explain why all this is important, right? Because those cities in China are clustered. There's a cluster down here in the Pearl River Delta. There's a cluster here where we are in the Yangtze River Delta. And there's a cluster up here in the Beijing-Tianjin corridor. Much of the rest of China is relatively empty. But when you want to look at renewable, sustainable energy, size of China becomes a problem, because you see all the solar is over here in the west and the north. All the wind resources are up here in the northwest. All the hydro resources are down in the southwest, like the Three Rivers Dam, for example. And all the demand is over here on the East Coast. So the people are not where the renewable energy resources are. There's a big spatial distance between them. So balancing electricity demand and supply becomes a big problem if you want to move to a sustainable growth model. But you add all that up, and I can tell you something about China. Sustainable development is not an option. What do I mean by that? Well, I don't mean it's not an option. I mean it's not an option. It's essential. Many Western cities, people know that sustainable development is an ideal. It's something they'd like to do. If you don't do it in China, in the size and density of Chinese cities, you wind up like this. Beijing, 2006, when the air pollution became so bad that you could barely see down the street. Now, I'm happy to report that things have improved a lot. This is a picture I took myself in Mentorgao, which is a suburb of Beijing, in 2021. Now, anybody can take pictures of air pollution on a good day or a bad day, and you get very different results. But if you look at the data, you find that Beijing's air quality has continuously, monotonically improved in the last 20 years. And that comes from UN data, not local biased data. Now, why is that? It didn't just happen by accident. In fact, in 2009, the central Chinese government created a pilot program for renewable energy vehicles, for electrification of the transport infrastructure in the top 13 tier 1 Chinese cities, as they call it. They said, we're just going to electrify the transportation. In 2009, if you remember back that far, electrification of a city's transportation infrastructure was commercially unviable. Commercially, it made no sense. China just did it. They went and bought electric buses, they bought charging units, they installed the maintenance infrastructure that was needed to maintain those buses. That created the market. This is one of my favorite case studies, because if you draw a line to the present day now, at least the last data I have, which was from 2020, said that if you count up all the electric buses in the world, 98% of them are in China. If you look at fast chargers for electric vehicles that are publicly accessible, 82% of them are in China. This has nothing to do with importing technology from other places. I believe it's entirely due to the creation of a market in 2009 that gave Chinese innovators like BYD, like CATL, like NIO, a market into which they could innovate. That's the value of working within a system where you can create these markets in sustainable development. And that certainly contributed, it's not the only thing, but that contributed to that improvement in air quality in Beijing. And now all of the big top Chinese cities are largely electrified. Shenzhen has electric buses, electric taxis, by far the majority. It's not just transportation. Of course, I told you those problems with the renewable resources not being where the population is. So State Grid in China is now working to create a ubiquitous power-based Internet of Things. It was delayed a couple of years, of course, due to COVID, but I would predict that in 5 to 10 years from now, you will see innovation dominance in areas of smart grid coming out of China. Because again, just doing it like this creates the market. If you don't have a market, you can't innovate. So how does that relate to JITRI? And many of you will be familiar with this risk spectrum of innovation, where the risk moves depending on the stage of the innovation process. Very early stage research tends to answer the question, will it work? It's what we call the technology risk. And that research tends to be funded by universities and national laboratories, tends to be funded by government. And as you move to the later stages of the innovation process, corporations start to take on the business risk, a different question. Will anybody buy it? Can I build a business around this idea? And that's generally funded by the private sector. And of course, in the middle there, the very famous, almost cliched valley of funding death. And that's where we put JITRI to try to bridge that valley of death. JITRI tries to pull ideas out of universities and national laboratories and put them into corporations to make real progress in sustainable development in China and in the world. But it also looks into the corporations that are in Jiangsu and the Yangtze Delta region and tries to pull needs out of those corporations and bring them to the universities and national laboratories so they're working on the right problems. And it does that by really 3 platforms. The first thing we build is research institutes. This is a little also out of date. We have over 80 now research institutes around Jiangsu. They spend a total of over $300 million a year, which is highly leveraged from local government and private investment. And the research staff, I think, is now over 11,000. And you can see on the left, distribution of research institutes around Jiangsu province. Again, the market is Jiangsu industry. The province of Jiangsu in China was historically the heart of manufacturing in China. It's also got a very strong base in modern manufacturing, in new materials, in aerospace and composites. JITRI tries to establish these institutes to fill gaps in the innovation infrastructure to help this strong industry move to the next generation of innovation-driven development. When we build a new institute, we'll typically invest in it for 5 years, but JITRI only takes a minority stake. We only have about a 10% ownership stake in our institutes. Majority ownership, which often surprises my foreign audiences, is actually with the technical team that founds the institute. We don't just allow them to have ownership of their ideas. We in fact insist upon it, because the technical team has to have skin in the game to innovate and make sure they connect that innovation to industry. It comes back to the motivation for innovation coupled with the market for innovation. Every year, about 1,000 technologies are spun off to industry out of the JITRI Institute system, and about 100 spin-off companies start. Some of them are very small. Many of them fail, of course, because JITRI has a high tolerance for failure. But the most successful become quite large companies in Nanjing, Suzhou, and other major cities in Jiangsu province. But I probably talked enough about the importance of the market, and JITRI's research focus. People often ask me, well, what sort of research do you focus on? We focus on what industry needs. And those needs are brought in by a different type of infrastructure, which we call our joint enterprise innovation centers. JITRI has over 200 of these now, and they are joint centers, lightly funded, small, just a couple of people at a company, but they connect the company to JITRI, and they are tasked not with doing research, but with identifying gaps in their particular industry verticals. So we hope they will bring with them their upstream and downstream companies and bring technology demands into JITRI so that we can see where those market needs are and see where to invest in innovation. And we have over 200 of the top Jiangsu companies. They're selected to be leaders in their particular niche of technology. And JITRI's job is then to connect these local companies with both our domestic resource and our international resource. So JITRI, in a way, becomes two bridges: a bridge between science and industry in China, and a bridge linking global innovation to Jiangsu province. We have over 55 domestic partners, top Chinese universities, and we also run over 100 international projects around the world. I want to go back to this idea of risk because, again, I think it's very key how far you can go up that risk-reward axis in innovation. And one of JITRI's policy platforms that reduces risk for both sides is what we call our joint venture business model, where JITRI, again, will be a minority shareholder in an overseas team that wants to come in and land an institute or land a company. And there's two success cases here for this. Soeks is a Dutch company, which landed in Suzhou, and Haldor Topsoe is a Danish company that focuses on catalysis. They have a lot of business in the oil and gas industry. And in the case of Haldor Topsoe, they didn't want to come to Suzhou to develop new catalysts. But it turns out that when you have a catalyst and you want to put it in an application in a chemical process, there's a lot of development that goes on and a lot of innovation to actually optimize that catalyst for a particular process. And Haldor saw the value of bringing that part of the innovation closer to their customers in the Yangtze Delta region. So we set up a joint venture where they actually have 60 to 80% of the capital of that joint venture. So they benefit from all of the research that goes on, all of the profits. JITRI only takes 10%, and a local government or industry park typically take another 10%. Within that capital structure, we can set up an operating fund for the JV for 3 to 5 years, where we'll fund 90% of their capital operating costs. So things like buildings, things like major capital equipment. And that enables a very asset-light business model for the technical team that wants to come in to Jiangsu. The capital-light business model reduces their risk. On the other hand, the company, the institute, has to land somewhere, and where it generally lands is a local industry park in China or with a local government, and they tend to be quite risk-averse, very conservative for good reasons of political advancement. So JITRI's involvement can also reduce their risk by validating the technical team, validating the technology concept, and most important of all, once again, validating the market for the technology that's going to come out of this. So this business model reduces risk on both sides, allows both sides to go further up the risk-reward spectrum and profit more from bringing innovation into the local market. We also have a project manager system where we can bring teams into Jiangsu. If they're approved for this, we'll actually hire the project manager team for 6 to 9 months and fund them typically about $50K in US dollar terms, mostly on a reimbursement process, but enable them to come into Jiangsu and build their team, and again, validate their business model and investigate the market. And a project manager program after 6, 9 months, maybe a year, is expected to land somewhere in Jiangsu province. And we've brought in, typically, these are the last pre-COVID numbers. Of course, things have gone through a bit of a dip with all the COVID lockdowns, but we'll be back probably starting next year. Before COVID, we were running 30 to 40 project manager teams a year. And for me, the most important thing that nobody ever wants to tell you in the Chinese system is that about 80% of these fail to land. For anyone that's done technology development, that shouldn't be surprising. That's actually a really good hit rate for bringing in technology companies. But the 20% that do land go on to become profitable, successful, innovation-driven companies. And this is JITRI's long-term goal, to build clusters of innovation around the province, and so to actually bring in a culture of innovation itself into Jiangsu. And those that land, again, what we've essentially done is reduce the risk profile for our local governments, local industry parks that are landing them, whilst also reducing the risk spectrum for the project manager team that actually wants to come in and land that company. And we also put in place a funding pool program where if overseas partners can find a project that interests both them and one of our JITRI partner companies or one of our research institutes, then we can actually fund from JITRI headquarters a half to 2/3 of that project, and that funding can go direct to the overseas university or institute. And again, I cast this into the spectrum of risk reduction for cross-border funding, because getting money overseas for a Chinese business is actually rather difficult, and also reduces the risk for the overseas university because they are working within an MOU framework with JITRI, and so everything is above board, and we can keep all the paperwork in place. And there's no danger of getting accused of developing IP somewhere where you shouldn't be doing it. So that's just a few of the ways that JITRI tries to enhance innovation and reduce risk both for the innovators and for the receptors. And our ecosystem is now expanding. It's no longer just JITRI, although on the left there you see our new headquarters in Nanjing. My office is right on the corner of that first building. This is 100,000 square meters, including exhibition space, which has a Waitrose exhibition as part of it. We have 3 meals a day dining in there and buildings for some of our partners who want to come and put a footprint in Jiangsu province. We have an innovation center in Shangcheng in Suzhou, which includes a state-of-the-art materials analysis facility. And just last year, the Shanghai Yangtze Delta Innovation Institute was launched. So we're now expanding out of Jiangsu into other provinces. In fact, you see the map at the bottom. This is all being brought together under a national concept called the National Innovation Center of Excellence, or NICE. And it will bring together Jiangsu province with Shanghai Metropolitan District, which is already in the program, but also Zhejiang province and Anhui province will come into NICE to form a regional innovation ecosystem in the Yangtze Delta, and it will be one of China's big three. We are leading the Yangtze Delta. There's another innovation ecosystem up in the Beijing-Tianjin corridor and another down in the Pearl Delta in Shenzhen, Hong Kong. I believe the Yangtze Delta will account for about 25% of Chinese GDP by the time we put all this together next year. And it's over 200 million people in this innovation ecosystem. And so that's moving to a whole different slide background here. And yeah, some of those numbers that I just gave you are actually on this slide. Because of its excellence in manufacturing, the Yangtze Delta region, Jiangsu province, is one of the wealthiest areas of China. Our GDP per capita is almost double that of the average, but it's worth keeping it in context that that's still only about half the GDP per capita of a typical Western European country, like, for example, Spain. So China is developing fast, but it is still developing. Now that leads me to Waitrose, because I've talked a lot about risk management into the Chinese market and why that's so important. There's also a couple of things that I noted in a panel discussion at the summit that I was just at Waitrose, in that I started off with the importance of cooperating and innovating across borders. That also, borders means several different things, right? You can have national borders, you can have borders between technical disciplines. Most importantly, you can have borders between cultures. I've been doing this for a long time now. As an American British living in China, I'm very aware of the difficulties of cooperating across cultures in technological development. And although it's very desirable to do that for all the reasons that I've already gone through, I think it's worth acknowledging that it's not easy. And Waitrose, I believe, can reduce the risk of cross-cultural collaboration by acting as a nexus to bring people together, to introduce them to each other, and to communicate needs from research users to research providers. And that's really the core of the Waitrose innovation ecosystem on the left. It starts with the roots with the CIRA system, which you can find on cira.eco, which brings people together to try to solve problems in sustainability. But that's just the introduction, it's the roots. The rest of the Waitrose innovation system does capacity development. We bring people together in an innovation summit and also regional meetings. And we hope to lower these barriers to cross-cultural, cross-border collaboration and advance the Sustainable Development Goals, which is now Waitro's first priority. We're aided in that by our regional focal points. We have one in Europe at LATAT in Spain, Asia and the Pacific at TISTA in Thailand, not far from you, Middle East and North Africa, Latin America and the Caribbean, and Africa all have their regional focal points, which are branches of the Waitro Secretariat to help us reach out to our members and help them connect to one another and work together more effectively. Capacity development program just this year. I'm sorry, this is an old slide. It says upcoming events, and of course you've missed them all. As in June, this is just an example of Waitro events. We had roundtables on managing diversity and international research, on responsible research and innovation, and on fair partnerships and the role of intellectual properties. And you can find reports on those now on the Waitro website, and it will come out in our annual report early next year. And the Waitro Digital Benchmarking Project is ongoing now. This is an online system, which is the next generation of the original Waitro benchmarking that went on in the 1990s. What benchmarking means is essentially trying to draw out the best practices of how RTOs, research technology organizations, most effectively work in their particular field, and helping our members learn from one another, helping each of our member organizations be the best that they can possibly be. We need members to use that. It should be online now. You can find it from the Waitro website, and please do go and benchmark yourselves. And if you're not a member of Waitro, barriers to entry right now are very low. You can find how to do that again on the Waitro website at waitro.org. And that's the best I can give you. Unfortunately, since I can't be there, the best I can do is give you some web addresses and email addresses where you can get in touch and find out more details, both about JITRI and about Waitro and what the opportunities are. My email address is down there at the bottom on the right-hand side. But the Waitro website is also very good, waitro.org. I'd encourage you to go take a look at it. And our German office maintains social networks on Facebook, LinkedIn, which is the only one I use, Twitter and Instagram are all on there. And you can find a Waitro newsletter also on the website. So please do get in touch. If you're not a Waitro member, please join. And if you are a Waitro member, please use it. It's a challenge to Waitro that it is an association at the organization level. So organizations join Waitro, but too often the staff at those organizations don't actually know that they're a member of Waitro. So we have to get the word out down the ranks to the people who actually do the innovation. And that's all I have time to tell you about, but just the summary points that I'd like you to take away is that despite all the various definitions of innovation that you can find online, it really requires two things. It requires risk and it requires motivation. And if you want to run a successful innovation business, I suggest that you seriously look at minimizing the risk and maximizing the motivation to actually innovate. Cross-cultural cooperation, it's essential, but it's also difficult. Waitro can lower the barriers to that. JITRI can also reduce the risk for entering the very unique Chinese sustainability market. That case study I gave you on electric transportation is being reproduced across a range of industries. And again, one last time, if you want to innovate, it's very useful to have a market to innovate into. Waitro itself reduces the risk of that cross-cultural cooperation, cross-border cooperation, and interdisciplinary cooperation. So with that, I wish you all the very best of success for this very ambitious set of conferences that you're running over the next few days. I hope next time around, I can actually be there in person to meet you. With that, thank you for your attention and goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you to Dr. Paul for your speech and also to all participants for the attention. I saw Mr. Junanto Prinantoro have raised hand. Maybe he wants to ask you directly, Dr. Paul. We have time for one question shortly. Please, host, help to promote him as panelist. Thank you. Mr. Junanto Prinantoro. Would you please? And Dr. Paul, would you answer some question for the attendees? A question, I mean. Mr. Junanto Prihantoro, we are already talking permitted, Sam. Or Ms. Sri Purwaningsih from microbiology. Ms. Sri Purwaningsih, please. Okay. Already promote. Ms. Sri Purwaningsih. Okay. Hasn't accepted yet by Ms. Sri. Okay. I think a little bit difficult. Ms. Sri, can you accept the access to be the panelist? Or maybe there have some difficulties to connect. Already? Okay. Okay, please, Ms. Sri Purwaningsih. Yeah. Would you? Yes, please. Would you ask some question to Dr. Paul, Ms. Sri? Can you hear my voice clearly? No, I think we have some difficult question connecting to deliver the question to us. Dr. Paul, are you still with us?
Hi, yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Oh, okay. Would you deliver some highlight to us, maybe as closing statement, please?
So, sorry, what's the question?
We don't have any question because maybe their connection is a little bit inconvenience signal. Oh, we have question in chat room. The question is, for researchers with a limited budget, what is the best approach? From Mr. Heranuddin.
Well, I have to say, and I hope you can hear me okay. I actually just flew into Dubai, and I'm coming to you from the Dubai Airport Business Lounge, where I will leave in a little while. So the question is, for researchers with a limited budget, what is the best approach? Which is an interesting question, because I think every researcher I've ever known has a limited budget, including me. Finding funding, of course, is one of the biggest challenges of doing research. An old friend of mine in the US who used to be vice president at University of Texas, actually had an interesting way of putting it. He said, all innovation requires vision, but vision without funding is hallucination. I think the approach, of course, has to be to do what you can with what you have, but also partnering can lead to new sources of money that you might not previously have found. Of course, my personal experience always comes down to the Chinese market and jittery. And when you have a good idea that you can sell into the Chinese market, then we can try to find funding locally. Jittery can also subsidize cross-border research. From the Waitrose angle, Waitrose has run events over the summer, for example, helping its members access large funding pools like Horizon Europe. There was a meeting in Barcelona in June to look at everything coming out of Horizon Europe in the next year or so, and to try to develop consortia to go after those very significant pots of funding that are coming out. So I think working with partners can help you go after these funding, but there's no magic answer, and funding is always limited.
Thank you. Okay, so Waitrose is one of solution to get partnership collaboration internationally. Is it, Dr. Paul? Thank you very much. Maybe you want to deliver something to closing statement this moment, please.
There's another question on there is what's the most risk when government funding couldn't make private sector funding happen? And I think that's the risk spectrum that I put up in an early part of the presentation, right? Where government funding is at the early stage risk typically. I always like to characterize it, the question, will it work? And then the private sector funding comes in later, and the question there is not will it work, it's will anybody buy it? Can I make a business out of it? And that transition is exactly why you need organizations like Jittery. You have to target funding at that transition, what we typically call the valley of funding death. And you see, Jittery in Jiangsu province is not a government organization. We are largely funded from Jiangsu, but Jittery's structure is a private non-profit with our own board of directors. The board of directors has government officials on it, but we also have industry leaders from Jiangsu, investment bank leaders, venture capitalists. And setting up that sort of organization can actually bridge that risk. That is Jittery's main mission, to bridge across the valley of funding death from that government funding to the private sector funding. So I think a lot of people, at least within China, are starting to look at the Jittery model and see that it's had some significant successes, and it's starting to be copied in other provinces and areas of China. And it would be very interesting to be able to export that model now to other countries and to help other places bridge that gap between government funding and private sector funding. For me, the way to minimize that risk is always to look for the market, to be realistic about the fact that technology push, in my experience, rarely works. Another of my favorite quotes, of course, is nobody buys technology. Seen people over the last 35 years, many people try to sell technology, probably 95% of them have failed. People buy solutions to problems. So you have to identify the problem, find the technology to solve it, put the two together, and then you can make that transition.
Okay, I think we have limited time. Then you already answer Ms. Endang Trimargawati question. Actually, we still have one question from Ms. Murad maybe Mr. Murad Makarasi. Would you please to answer one more question, the last question? What is the general rate of return and return time in R&D projects? Thank you.
Yeah, the general rate of return and return time in R&D projects. I mean, there is no general answer to this. It's very project specific, and it can really only be addressed on a case-by-case basis. Individual project returns. Venture capital in China has a relatively short time horizon. If you can get them to look 2 to 3 years ahead, you're doing quite well. But JITRI's overall return to the government is very explicitly on a longer time scale, the decade time scale. In fact, it's my boss, actually, the president of JITRI, Professor Liu Qing, who's both a technical expert and somebody that has this almost magical ability to explain these concepts to government, to interface with government. And he's very explicit that the return of an organization like JITRI has to be measured in a much longer time scale. He says, look at us in 10 years. If there are clusters of innovation prospering in Jiangsu, then we will have succeeded. But each project has its own risk profile, its own time profile. So I think it's really impossible and undesirable to generalize on what the time scale and rate of return of those might be.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Paul. I'm sorry for Ms. Sri Purwaningsi. We already give you a chance, actually, but maybe there's weak connection. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Indonesia organizer, we appreciate and would like to say thank you for making time to join us today. We are looking forward for next fruitful session and follow-up activities in the future. I'm Diah Sugianto. Have a good day and thank you. Selamat siang. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much, Dr. Paul. Thank you very much, all attendees.